guys, it is Saturday, and I hope that you are all doing well. I am going to wait a couple minutes till I see we have some people here with us. But I can get started with some cleaning house sorts of things. I did finish making all of the groups for committees. I'm really excited about that. Let me tell you a little bit about what's been going on behind the scenes. So, I've been working at getting the groups made, which has been awesome. And slowly we have members that are joining. So over time I expect the groups to grow, and within each group I expect that I will be adding, I will be promoting somebody to lead each group, maybe 2 people depending on group sizes, and that's because I really want you guys in your states to run your own states. I know I've mentioned this before, but they're yours. You know what you need in your state. So over time we'll get that built. It's going to be one of those hurry up and wait sorts of things. But anyway, I digress. The point is we're going to have leaders in each group for each state, and each state is created, and that is what counts. Now, I want to tell you guys about Illinois. Illinois was one of the first committees that I created, and it's going strong. We have a lot of members in there, and we've already promoted leadership for that group. So I have Laura Lynn there as admin. Thank you. And I also have Dana Madden-Rickard as moderator. Thank you. And they're going to take over from me, and so they're going to get you guys started in what really needs to start happening so that we can really make change in your state. I am so excited for Illinois. You guys are off to such a fast and strong start. I know that there hasn't just been work done on Facebook, but it's been, you know, going on behind the scenes as well, and I am so excited about that. That really is, you guys keep me fueled, you guys keep me going, so I really love you for that. So, earlier today, this morning, I posted a post, you guys probably, some of you saw it, and it was an admin announcement, and it basically said that I'm looking for ideas for names for the group. And then I deleted that post. And then with that one though, I had also made a separate post saying that by the time I go to sleep tonight, we're going to have all the groups renamed. And that is the truth. All the groups are getting renamed. We are finally ready to scrap the name of Delner. But in the meantime, I really want to make sure that we as a community come up with the name. So right now, forgive me for looking down frequently, I have a whole bunch of notes here. So we will have a regular name that's going to be the name of the group. It may or may not be attached to the legislation that we get to, but it will be the group name that we use. I'm also going to attach it to the different committee groups. So committee groups might not get done tonight, but I do plan on, at the very least, renaming this group and renaming our page so that it is more reflective of what we're doing. Now, I had some people actually ask, is the renaming at the request of the nurse involved? And yes, it is at the request of the nurse involved. I've promised you this whole time that I will change the name as soon as I hear about her thoughts and ideas on it. So once she's ready, right now she is not ready to come forward and identify herself. She does have stuff going on that requires her anonymity. So she will step forward and give a name to this. She's very excited about what we're doing. She wants to be part of it. For a while though, she's got other stuff going on that kind of prevents her from being known and from naming it. But there is going to come a time when we do a shorthand name like we have right now with Delner's Law. There will be an easier, quick name that'll roll off the tongue like that. So The name that we come up with now, if that becomes the name of the legislation, it might be a permanent name. But if we decide to go with different names for the legislation itself when we go and take it to state and federal leaders, we will have like the little shorthand name that will be good for the public eye to, you know, hashtag it quickly and refer to it quickly so that people know it, kind of like Amber's Alert. But that's what's going on with the name. Make sure you look for the poll. Make sure you go ahead and vote on which one you like best. I do know that we have one that's really going strong. Melissa Pumphrey, I hope I got that right. Melissa Pumphrey actually commented somewhere that she liked the idea of Healthcare Workers Protection Act, and I love it. So I made sure it was one of the poll choices, and right now it is going strong. It's the top choice by far. So anyway, go check out that, see what you like. Now, the thing that I really wanted to dive into, and thankfully we have a few more viewers here, because this is really the main part of what we're here to talk about. If you guys are near any children, if you might have some latent PTSD going on where you don't feel comfortable hearing about any kind of violence, or you know, pretty graphic situations that we might be exposed to working in healthcare, I recommend turning it off and maybe listening to it later when you're more comfortable and your surroundings are a little bit more appropriate for it, because I am going to talk about violence and I am going to talk about stuff that's hard to think about. So, in case you hadn't noticed, I am broadcasting from my vehicle. The reason being that I don't want to include kids. I do have kids. They are younger than I feel comfortable with having here while I'm doing this. So, anyway, I managed to land an interview with a corrections officer. He agreed to speak on anonymity. I know that I've mentioned here that my own husband is a corrections officer. It is not him. I can tell you all that he and I discussed. I took a lot of notes, but he spoke out on the condition of anonymity regarding his identity and what state he's in. But it was a very candid conversation. It was a good one to have, and I hope that it helps you guys as healthcare providers kind of understand a little bit more about the relationship between healthcare workers and inmates and COs, and really how COs have to approach a situation that might come up, just because we don't know. You know, you see the media take a story about some weird healthcare situation, and they'll go full blown on it. And you know, us working in healthcare, we go and turn on the media and we see this crazy story, and we know there is way more to that, or we can just tell just by hearing it that context has really been changed somehow, or the media just really didn't understand what happened and it's obvious. So that's why, that kind of thinking is actually why I wanted to make sure that we got law enforcement every now and then on our live videos, because it's the same way. You know, we hear strange stories or wild stories about things that happen with law enforcement, and we want to have an opinion on it. We want to judge the situation, but I mean, just like in healthcare, if we want to be fair, I mean really fair, we don't walk in their shoes. So we don't know what it's like to be them. We don't know what their orders are. We don't know how they prioritize their role, especially when they're around us. And so I thought, I really loved that this guy got in touch with me earlier today, and if he's watching right now, thank you for your candidness. Thank you for everything that you shared with me. And hopefully if anybody has questions that they would like to direct to him or COs in general, go ahead and ask them in comments. I'm not going to be able to necessarily answer every question, but I will, I'll try my best. And if I don't know, then I'll come back later after asking him, and I will share answers to your questions then. I am going to talk through this kind of quickly because I don't want to make you guys stuck here forever. And then at the end, I'll take whatever questions that I can, because we did talk for quite a while. So, really quick before I get going though, I see a comment here from Kelly. Kelly, I am going to do you the honor of not butchering your last name. But she says, my sister is a CO. They are as strapped with staffing as we are. It is sad. We need their back, and they need ours. Kudos to your CO family and friends. And that's the truth. That is the truth. And actually, that was one of the things that came out in the end of the interview, was that they struggle with staffing for the exact same reason that we do. They need staffing just as much as us, and you know, for us, staffing can result in patient deaths, patient falls, and for them, oh, Mary is saying the live feed is not working. Are you guys getting me okay? I'll keep talking, and then if you're having any struggles, then I can restart. I'm actually on data. I'm not on Wi-Fi right now because I'm out in my driveway, but I can move closer to the house and do it on Wi-Fi if it needs to be. But anyway, yeah, that was one of the things that came out that was a really big theme, was that staffing. You know, when they don't have staff, they can't protect our staff. So that gets complicated. But, you know, it's a hard job to be a CO. Not everybody is cut out for it. Not everybody would even think about doing that as a job. And, you know, corrections officers, they're actually called the forgotten cops because, you know, when you think of cops, you think of police, you think of PD, taking care of people out in the field, but corrections officers are also law enforcement officers. So, alright, I'm seeing working fine, and I can hear you. Okay, I'm going to keep going. If it's not working for you, I guess, you know, after upload, you can go ahead and watch it in the replay. But anyway, so what they deal with, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I could not imagine driving to a prison every day, getting locked in, and feeling like I'm a grasshopper surrounded by a massive number of ants who outnumber you, are massively stronger than you are, whose day-to-day experience is bulking up and getting stronger. I don't know about you, I could never do that. And, you know, anytime I've talked to law enforcement officers, they say the same thing. They couldn't imagine them ever doing what we do. So I find that there needs to be a huge mutual respect, because honestly, I can't imagine what it is day to day to live that way. And I live with a corrections officer, so, you know, I get to hear stuff about it. So I know that it's hard, but I still can't imagine how he gets it in him to go do that each day. But anyway, so I'm going to go through the notes that I took from this interview, and like I said, I'm going to go through kind of quickly, and I will take comments at the end because I want to make sure that we get through everything before we get sidetracked. And forgive if the lighting sucks. I'm sorry, the sun's starting to come down. I wanted to do this before that, but anyway. So, for a corrections officer, we started with the duties of corrections, and we also started with medical needs for inmates. So what this CO said to me was that if we're going to look at the duty, their duty, it is to first protect the public. Then that would be us, even when they're coming into the ED, or if they are inpatients, or if they're even going for like for dialysis or anything. They have a duty to protect everybody outside of the prison first. Then their colleagues, they have to have each other's back. So that the colleagues are number 2 on the list. Then detainees, so anybody who is detained, but then after that the offenders. So there is kind of a priority in what it is that they need to do, and how they would need to respond in priority order. So everything else that I'm going to say after this, I am speaking of medium and maximum security. I'm not talking about minimum or like the county lockup or drum tank. I am referring to only medium and maximum. And that honestly, when we're talking about the situations that are going on with violence from inmates, that's really who we're looking at, is the medium and maximum prisoners that are coming to see us. So at prisons themselves, and if we have any prison nurses here, or prison physicians, or anybody else, please speak up, because I'm getting this from a CO. I'm not a prison nurse, so I don't know. I'm saying only what this particular CO sees as being what they have. So, in the medium security prison, they have an infirmary, and in that infirmary, when there is an injury or any major medical issue, the charge nurse usually will triage that, and if it's above the triage nurse's ability to make decisions, or if they need an order to transport to the hospital, then they will also work with whoever is the provider on duty, whether it be a nurse practitioner or a PA or an MD or DO. So the things that they can do on site, they're kind of limited. They can't do ventilation. They can't do imaging. So if they need imaging on something, they have to ship that inmate out for it. But they do a lot of urgent care. So if somebody needs stitches, they'll do that. They do chronic care, so diabetic needs and COPD and all of those chronic issues would be taken care of there in-house. But this CO's prison, they don't do dialysis, they don't do sleep studies, they ship those out. So they'll have physicians from different specialties come in. So they might have a cardiologist, or they might have infectious disease. There's an RN who will do sick call. They'll do PT in-house. So there's a lot of stuff that they do in-house that doesn't really involve hospital care. So they are able to do a lot there. Now, I asked what the most frequent type of hospital transport they will have. So if somebody needs to go get shipped out, the most frequently occurring situation that this particular officer is transported is stab wounds. Sometimes they'll have seizures that are intractable. They also are trying, my understanding is they're trying to start doing the rape kits in-house. Rape is a little bit of a problem in prisons. So they have been traditionally taking their rape cases to the ED to get forensics to take care of it there. Now, I wanted to ask about self-harm. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but, you know, sometimes the inmates will engage in self-harm behaviors in order to get out, to go hang out in the ED for a little while. And it's not as frequent as television shows would make us believe. Sometimes you do have truly suicidal inmates, but not always. Sometimes they will do self-injurious behaviors to stop, I don't know, to let them have more phone calls, or to be able to bring food into their cells, stuff like that. They use self-injurious behaviors to try to leverage themselves to get something. When you have the ones who actually go as far as swallowing something, they do end up going to the ED because you have to get x-rays to make sure that whatever they swallowed is going to be okay to pass. Or, you know, if it's like glass or razor blades or something, they will require a surgeon. And that does happen. And in those cases, they're not always actually suicidal. Sometimes, like I said, they just want the attention, or, you know, whatever they might get out of what they did. He did say that sometimes inmates will do hunger strikes, which it's hard to prove if they actually do engage in a hunger strike, because they might have food in their cell, so it's hard to know if they are legitimately actually starving themselves. They will not get transported out, though. Now, they actually have an observation area, And in this observation area, they have their psych patients, their psych inmates, and they do kind of tier them. There is, in this observation area, levels 1 and 2 are the ones that we're really talking about. So level 1 is you will have people who have actively injured themselves. Sometimes they'll start cutting themselves if they're able. Sometimes they'll actually slam their head into the wall. That gets level 1, and sometimes, depending on the severity of it, that might get transported out. As a side note, you know how every now and then you'll hear about inmates who receive injuries or just suspects picked up by police? You'll hear about how they got fractures, or they got a crushed skull, or somehow they were injured, or they were actually killed while they were in custody. This is actually really why that usually happens. So you'll get somebody who does not want to be detained or held, and that person will quite literally slam their head into the side of the car, or will do whatever they can to harm themselves. If you ever notice hold on, let me move this. If you ever look at the back of a vehicle, a police vehicle, you may notice that right over here on the back seats will have an actual cage on it, or some kind of a thing between where the suspect would sit and the window. And you would think that was to maybe prevent any kind of escape attempts, but really that's there so that they don't break the glass with their head trying to protest their arrest. But anyway, that happens very regularly, where inmates or suspects will do that. So, anyway, if you have somebody who swallowed stuff, they might get shipped to the ER, but after that, they actually, if what they swallowed is no big deal, they'll actually get sent back to the prison for medical observation. So, trying to see where I'm leaving off here. So in their observation units, they'll have people check on them every 15 minutes. But this area is also where they keep their isolation patients for negative pressure. They will also keep their regular psych patients there, so it's really kind of a locked, more specialized unit. So in a prison, you will have institutional directives, not just laws that govern what they can and cannot do. The institutional directives, those are basically the standing orders like we might get for a physician. The institutional directives basically tell them what they can and cannot do, the COs I mean, what they can and cannot do in public or with the inmate when they are just generally anywhere. This CO actually told me a story about several years ago. There was an inmate who was taken to the hospital, and the inmate wanted to go to the bathroom, and so 2 of his limbs were unshackled, and then the inmate actually tried to retrieve the officer's weapon. They had a scuffle. They did quickly get the situation under control, but you know, there's a theme here in case you hadn't noticed it, where inmates that are in the ED, they'll ask to use the bathroom and they'll get unshackled. So that's a really big theme. I don't know if any of you is working in the ED or inpatient and you get an inmate who says they want to use the bathroom. This is where the weakness is. Anyway, I digress. So institutional directives, according to the CO, they change so frequently that it's impossible for them to really keep up. But essentially, situations like with that person in the ED who tried to scuffle and take the CO's gun, before that point, they actually didn't have ED institutional directives. So at that point, they didn't really have a standing order for that situation specifically in that environment. So the state actually looked into that situation and they decided to write a directive. The problem with that being is that when you have continuing education, just like we would working in a hospital or to renew our licenses, very much in the same way, they throw a whole lot all the time, very frequently at the officers, and sometimes they give incomplete information, or they'll just hand them the page to sign saying that they read it, and then that's it. So when you've got officers that are pressed for time, or if you have inadequate or not very thorough management, you're not going to have the officers really reading what it is that needs to be read. They're not going to really process the updates as well. So that is a little bit of an issue there in prison systems. But one of the things that we could ask going forward, if you work in an ED or in a inpatient setting, or even if you work in, let's say, dialysis, and you know that you have inmates that come to you, one of the things that you personally could do right now is learn if these officers have directives for when they are in your setting. One of the things that I did was I asked this CO, okay, if there's a situation that maybe gets out of control, and it's my patient, how much authority do you have to make a decision in that moment? And essentially what he said was that in that moment, he has the authority to make necessary decisions. So what he said is that if the only way that that can really be changed is if a situation gets a bit wild or out of control or anything like that, and there's concern for safety, the doctor who is the attending can actually say, look, CO, this is what we're going to do for the patient, and you need to stand aside. The CO can actually say no, and you know, when they're there to protect public safety, you would kind of hope they would if it's not a safe situation. So what would happen at that point is if the doctor was really insistent about the CO standing down, the doctor could actually call the prison and report to whoever is the supervisor for that day. And that supervisor can contact the CO and say, look, you're going to have to stand down, or something like that. But it's always the control for the situation is otherwise in the hand of the corrections officer in this particular state. And again, I can't tell you the state, but it does give a little bit of hope knowing that the COs do have a little bit of control in that kind of a situation. And they are there for our safety. That is what they are there for. So if they are really on their game and they're doing their job, they will actually sit there and say no if we are about to do something unsafe. So that actually made me feel a lot better to hear, because I would rather a CO say no, you're not allowed to do that, than just sit there and, you know, play on his phone or something. So our country in the last few years has developed quite an anti-law enforcement sentiment. And I know everybody's divided on that, and I don't want to get into that. I do, however, want to say that, unfortunately, a fallout of that is that it leads to police officers and corrections officers to second-guess themselves. And, again, I'm not trying to get into the politics, but this CO actually expressed to me that there is frustration because if he is on duty with an inmate in an ED, if he had the inmate get away and that inmate was a known violent offender and that inmate is known to encourage violence and just a generally dangerous person, if that CO is put into that situation where he has to stop that inmate from leaving, his first duty is to protect the public. If he had to actually fire his weapon and he actually had to take down that inmate in a violent way, the anti-law enforcement sentiment makes that complicated, because once that happens, you're now looking at a really difficult fallout, and that corrections officer is now going to be in the spotlight, getting all the media attention, will probably get to face law enforcement, possibly discharged from his job, and so that was one thing that he had mentioned while we were talking about this much. But what he says is to be done in a situation where an inmate happens to break free, and if he tries to flee, in a medium or maximum security inmate, the COs are supposed to do anything. Their orders are to do anything and everything that they can to stop that inmate from getting outside of their reach, basically. So if I kind of asked him to talk a little bit more about that, because, I mean, obviously at the same time we're here to help save lives and protect people, and it's hard to imagine